Chapter 1541. The most damning part about this experience was the loneliness. Tang discovered that he couldn't even inflict any harm or pain upon himself in this space, and his mind was incredibly alert, but there was nothing for him to do. In this environment, a normal person would most likely quickly go insane. Even in solitary confinement, one would still be able to hear some sounds, but there was nothing here. Tang had already cursed Kyangyu's hunting countless times in his heart. If it weren't for that accursed badge, he wouldn't be stuck here right now. He was even struck by the urge to give up on the sea god's trident, as this trial was simply too painful to endure. However, as soon as this thought surfaced in his mind, he immediately repressed it. How could he give up when sea god's trident was the true coordinates to track down his parents and loved ones? The training that he had endured on the demonic island began to shine through here. There was nothing to do anyway, so Tang began to attempt to calm himself down. He tried to completely empty his mind. He was far too alert to sleep in this world, but he could completely empty his own mind. In the beginning, he found this very difficult to accomplish, and all types of erratic thoughts would surface in his mind after just a short time. However, as time passed, he gradually began to improve in this endeavor. He discovered that this was a very interesting experience, as if he were battling against himself. After finding that state of inner peace, he would be able to calm down and rid himself of all the erratic thoughts. On top of that, in this calm state, he discovered that many problems that he couldn't find answers to in the past suddenly became very clear, both in cultivation as well as in other aspects of life. Thus, he began to think every time he entered this tranquil state, and whenever that happened, his mind would become very clear. Even though he couldn't cultivate here, his clarity of mind allowed him to work through one problem after another, and gradually, he became accustomed to silence and loneliness. He began to develop some coping mechanisms, such as finding inner peace, thinking about problems, and reminiscing about his own past. He still firmly believed that there would be a day when he would leave this golden world, and his heart became more and more tranquil and steadfast, as did his eyes. After an indeterminate period of time had passed, a beam of light suddenly appeared in his mind without any warning. Tang merely opened his eyes in a calm manner, and a faint smile appeared on his face. The second trial of the sea god, loneliness, has been completed. Duration, 1 year. 1 year? Tang heart stirred slightly upon hearing this. He had been in this world of nothingness for an entire year. His power spread through his entire body again, and sound was suddenly reintroduced into his world, something that he had become completely unaccustomed to. As he focused his gaze, he discovered that he was still in the bright city sports stadium, and Kyangyu's hunting was charging toward him from not far away. At this moment, Kyangyu's face was twisted with fury, and he was letting loose a guttural howl that didn't even sound human anymore. Clang! He reflexively raised his golden trident, and he discovered that it seemed to have become slightly lighter yet again. The bare coiling dragon staff struck the golden trident, but it was clear that the two weapons were on completely different levels. Kyangyu's stumbled back a few steps, then abruptly stopped in his tracks. In that instant, he caught a glimpse of Tang eyes. Those eyes had been filled with pride and mockery just a moment ago, yet they had suddenly become incredibly tranquil and calm, like a lake that had been undisturbed for centuries. Tang pointed his golden trident forward, and uttered the word restrict. Kyangyu's expression froze on his face, and he suddenly discovered that he was unable to do anything. Dragon Emperor slash. Countless beams of golden light instantly combined as one, and this one beam of light was filled with unstoppable will and regal radiance. In that instant, it was as if Tang had transformed into the overlord of heaven and earth, and his golden trident was like a blade that could sever space and time. Restrict time and space. Dragon Emperor slash. Throughout this past year of thought and enlightenment, he had finally managed to combine his time reversal domain, fury of the masses, all or nothing, and path of regal domination into a single attack, which was this Dragon Emperor slash. Boom. A projection appeared almost instantly in front of Kyangyu's and the congealed time and space warped before shattering into countless pieces. The entire protective barrier within the sports stadium also instantly crumbled, and a piercing dragon's roar reverberated throughout the entire venue. A massive halo proliferated outward, repelling Tang body into the distance, while a deep trench was left in the ground. Countless cracks had appeared over the entire competition platform, and Kyangyu Dongfang was standing in front of his own grandson with a furious expression. Kyangyu's was currently sitting on the ground, looking as if he had lost his soul. His coiling dragon staff had been snapped in half, and even though his battle armor was completely unscathed, there was a gash running down all the way from his forehead. The gash was only skin deep, but blood was pouring incessantly out of it, creating a very gory sight to behold. Kyangyu Dongfang was also holding his coiling dragon staff, but a deep gash had also appeared on it, and the staff was around a third of the way sliced through. Furthermore, there was a gash running from his face all the way down to his abdomen as well. He had immediately sealed off his own blood vessels, so he wasn't bleeding profusely like Kyangyu's but he had still been injured. This was the spirit pagoda chairman, a limit Douluo who was at least a demigod. Even though he had been off guard, there weren't many people in the world who would have been capable of injuring him. The entire stadium was stunned by the sheer destructive power of the golden trident. Tang withdrew his golden trident with a calm expression. Is the rest of the family going to gang up on me now? Kyangyu Dongfang took a deep breath to repress his own rage and incredulity, and said, Kyangyu's concedes the match. I intervened to save his life. Indeed, if it weren't for Kyangyu Dongfang's intervention, Kyangyu's would have most likely been sliced in half by that attack. Even his three-word battle armor wouldn't have been able to resist Tang golden trident at all. Not only was Dragon Emperor slash capable of sealing time and space, it could disregard all defenses as well. This was why Kyangyu Dongfang had been injured and his coiling dragon staff had been damaged, even though he had clearly blocked Tang attack and sent him flying with his domain. A faint smile appeared on Tang face, and he couldn't be happier with this outcome. He didn't know why the year he had spent in the second trial of the sea god seemed to have only equated to an instant in the real world, but he certainly wasn't complaining. Fei opened his mouth 3 times in succession to say something, but was still unable to find the appropriate words. Kyangyu Dongfang was clearly at the height of his rage, so it was best for Fei to remain silent in case he incurred the chairman's wrath. At this point, all of the spectators present had already erupted into a frenzy. Ul on you, ul on you, ul on you. This was a match being broadcasted all over the entire continent, and even though it wasn't very long, it had definitely been extremely spectacular. Kyangyu's seemed to have gained the upper hand with his initial ferocious barrage, but Tang had suddenly turned the tables with his enormous domain, then even wounded the spirit pagoda chairman with his golden trident. All of these scenes had been branded deep into the hearts of the spectators, and everyone was forced to adjust their evaluation of Oolong. Just how powerful did he have to be to have wounded Kyangyu Dongfang? Even a limit Douluo most likely wouldn't be able to easily injure another limit Douluo. In that instant, Oolong's future progression to the limit Douluo level had virtually become a foregone conclusion in the eyes of everyone present. Even Ming had put down his snacks and was looking on with his mouth gaped open in shock. Chapter 1542. He turned to Yuan and Yui, then said in a meaningful voice, "It's still not too late to dump Shishi and pursue Wulin. Lass." Yuan and Yui blushed, and said, "Please don't say that. Wulin already has Yuna." Ming shook his head, and sighed. "There's no way they can be together, so there's no point in considering that. Perhaps you should. What would you like to eat later, senior?" Shishi hurriedly asked. Ming slapped him on the shoulder with a mixture of amusement and exasperation in his eyes. "How about you stop being such a smartass and focus more on your cultivation?" Yuan and Yui was aware that Ming was only joking, and she asked, "I didn't really understand what just happened. Why is it that Kyangyu Dongfang managed to force Captain back, but he was injured in the process as well?" Ming replied, "Wulin really is an extraordinary kid, as expected of. Ahem. The final attack seemed to have combined all of his abilities, including even his domain and power of laws. It didn't appear to be all that special, but it drained virtually everything that he had. In addition to that, the golden trident he's wielding is an extremely powerful divine weapon, but Kyangyu Dongfang wasn't fully prepared, which is why he was injured. The most fearsome aspect of that attack is the fact that it can disregard all defenses. It can bypass 3-word battle armor, but suits of 4-word battle armor are enhanced by the power of laws to a certain extent, so perhaps they can nullify a portion of the attack's power. However, at Wulin's current cultivation rank, it appears he can't use that attack more than once in a short time. However, the fact that he was able to create such a technique shows that he's already found his own path. That attack wasn't inferior to Tang San's signature attacks. He had murmured that last sentence to himself, and he was currently in a very good mood. Tang had given him hope, and he was very eager to see Tang become more powerful, as that would increase his chances of finding the divine realm. If the divine realm hadn't disappeared, the Douluo continent wouldn't be in its current perilous situation. Oolong had won, and he had even injured Kyangyu Dongfang. Due to the fact that the match was being broadcasted live to the entire continent, there was no opportunity for the spirit pagoda to hide what had happened. As such, this match was already being discussed by everyone and evoking widespread excitement all over the continent. With the conclusion of this match, the representative for the third group had also been decided. Oolong was going to be one of the final 10 competitors to progress, while Kyangyu had been eliminated. ended. Kayangyu Tang fainted almost as soon as he left the competition platform, perhaps due to his injuries or perhaps due to his indignation. Kayangyu Dongfang also wore an extremely dark expression. It was already bad enough that Kayangyu Tang had lost in such embarrassing fashion, but what was even more unacceptable was the destruction of the Kayangyu family's most powerful treasure, the soul-sucking badge. How was he supposed to answer to the patriarch? On top of that, Douluo's power and that fearsome divine weapon in his possession had also set off massive alarm bells in Kayangyu Dongfang's mind. Never did he think that the legendary blue lightning current dragon clan would be this powerful. However, as the spirit pagoda chairman, he couldn't afford to be blinded by his own rage. To the media outlets, he had announced that he had only intervened during the match to protect Kayangyu Tang. The attack that Douluo had unleashed at the time was something that he was still unable to control. So if Kayangyu Dongfang hadn't stepped in, his grandson would have been killed for sure. This joust for a spouse event wasn't a war, so death should be avoided at all costs. Even if it had been someone else in Kayangyu Tang's position, he would have stepped in anyway. As for the injury he had sustained, his response to it had been quite gracious. Firstly, he had praised Douluo's weapon as the most powerful divine weapon he had ever seen, and also expressed his congratulations toward Douluo. At the same time, he also hinted at the fact that he had been ill-prepared and didn't want to hurt Douluo, which was why he had been injured. Through these statements, he was attempting to save face for the spirit pagoda as much as possible. However, there was no bending of the truth, and it was very apparent that the badge that Douluo had shattered at the end of the battle was no ordinary treasure. Of course, Kayangyu Dongfang's statement had also drawn much attention toward Douluo, and everyone was speculating about exactly what divine weapon that golden trident of his was. Just as the spirit pagoda had planned, interest in the joust for a spouse event had been reignited, but the focus of that interest was a little different from what they had anticipated. Tang was feeling so feeble that he was almost unable to walk out of the sports stadium. Once outside, he immediately contacted his friends and was quickly picked up by an unmarked Tang sect vehicle. The car's one-way glass kept out all prying eyes, and Zhang and Yali were waiting for him in the car. They had clearly both arrived as they were concerned that someone would try to plot against Tang. Your spiritual power is extremely depleted, Yali said as she pressed a hand onto Tang forehead, nourishing his mind with her gentle holy light. Only after seeing the two limit Douluos did Tang completely relaxed, and he was unable to even muster up a response. A long while later, he was finally somewhat recovered, and he gently laid a hand onto the back of Yali's hand. I'm fine now, mother. His feebleness had stemmed from severe overexertion of his spiritual power, which was, in turn, a result of the Dragon Emperor he had unleashed. He was certain that if it weren't for the improved control over his own spiritual power that he had developed during that year of solitude in the second trial of the Sea God, there was no way he would have been able to unleash the Dragon Emperor Slash. The Dragon Emperor Slash was extremely powerful, but it had almost completely wiped out his mental manifestation level spiritual power. Zhang Xin's brows were slightly furrowed as he said, "You've put on too much of a show today, Wuling. There's still some time left until the conclusion of this joust for a spouse event, and it's most likely not going to be a peaceful period of time." Tang Wuling replied with a wry smile, "I didn't want this to happen. I was struck by sudden enlightenment and reflexively used that technique. Even I didn't think it would be powerful enough to harm Kayangyu Dongfang." Of course, what he intentionally neglected to mention was that he really was trying to kill Kayangyu Tang at the time. Kayangyu Tang was his love rival and had attempted to kill him with that soul-sucking badge, so he naturally had no mercy for him. A faint smile appeared on Zhang Xin's face. That attack gave even Yali and myself the chills. We didn't think you'd be able to create such a powerful technique so soon. Once it's fully developed, it's definitely going to be one of the most powerful offensive techniques of the Soulmaster world. The fact that this praise was coming from a limit Douluo was sufficient testament to just how powerful that attack had been. Yali nodded and chimed in, "It's all right. If we had wanted to keep a low profile, we wouldn't even have come here in the first place. Zhang Xin and I will stay at the Blacksmith Association for the next few days. Let's see who'll dare to make a move against you. Besides, your uncle teacher is a divine blacksmith. No one would want to offend him." Tang Wuling nodded in response. He was far too feeble at the moment, and he closed his eyes to rest. He was almost instantly able to calm himself down, and his spiritual power began to quickly recover. His year of loneliness hadn't gone to waste. It had taught him how to control his own mind. Chapter 1543. Yuna was standing beside the bed of the unconscious Kayangyu Tang with a series of emotions flashing through her eyes. Kayangyu Tang had already been unconscious for over an hour, and according to the healing system Soulmasters, he had fainted mostly due to emotional reasons rather than from his injuries. The vast majority of the power of Tang Wuling's Dragon Emperor Slash had been withstood by Kayangyu Dongfang, so Kayangyu Tang's injury was only skin deep. He was a titled Douluo himself, after all, so his defensive prowess was certainly no joke. Kayangyu Dongfang was busy taking care of other matters, so Yuna was staying behind to look after Kayangyu Tang, and at this moment, her mind was completely elsewhere. The Dragon Emperor Slash had been extremely powerful, but what had truly stunned her was Tang Wuling's 100-meter domain. That domain represented the acknowledgement of the Dragon Clan. She had long been aware of Tang Wuling's bracelet, but she didn't think that it contained such pure and unadulterated admiration. From Tang Wuling's mental manifestation, she was finally able to understand what he had done during his 1,000-day absence. He did possess the Golden Dragon King bloodline, but he was still a human, yet he had laid all of the dragon skeletons of the dragon tomb to rest on his own. She could still clearly recall that the entire Dragon Valley space had been extremely unstable at the time. Furthermore, she didn't want to have to face him, so she had hurriedly left. However, he had disappeared for over 3 years, and by then, it had become impossible for her to access the Dragon Valley again. So that was what he had been doing all along. What he had done for the Dragon Clan couldn't be described through words. At the time, he was still far less powerful than he currently was, and as a normal human, his lifespan was limited to only around 100 years at most, yet he had chosen to expend 3% of the best years of his life on completing such a lonely and thankless task. It was no wonder that his soul power hadn't improved by much upon his return. He had spent all his time and energy on that task. The gratitude of all of the dragon souls had been condensed into that bracelet, and it acted as an amulet for him, preventing any dragon from being able to attack him, not even the evil vanquishing dragon. A series of complex thoughts raced through Yuna's mind, but they were concealed behind her calm facade. Right at this moment, a hoarse cough rang out, and Kayangyu Tang opened his eyes in a disoriented manner. He immediately caught sight of Yuna, and his memories gradually returned to him, upon which he clearly began to become more emotional. Yuna strode over to him before whispering something into his ear, and only then did his expression ease slightly. "Really? Yes. I'm so sorry, Nana. I can't believe how useless I am. It's all my fault." Kayangyu Tang closed his eyes with a pained expression. "Don't think too much and focus on recovery. I'll take care of everything else. The badge has already been destroyed. Don't make grandfather have to worry about you as well." Yuna's voice was very gentle and seemed to be imbued with some type of magical power. Kayangyu Tang gradually became more relaxed as he heard her voice. "You're so good to me, Nana. Shh, focus on resting for now," Yuna urged in a gentle voice. Kayangyu Dongfang was standing at the entrance to the room, appraising the two of them with furrowed brows, but he had a relieved look in his eyes. He was very pleased with Yuna's attitude, but the loss of the soul-sucking badge was far too severe, particularly considering it had been destroyed during such a farcical event. He really didn't know how to explain this to the patriarch. Tang Wuling was situated within a boundless expanse of cloud and mist, within which a series of giant dragons were flying around him while letting loose elated roars, seemingly celebrating something. Tang Wuling had no idea how he had gotten here, but everything felt very realistic. Right at this moment, a massive golden dragon suddenly appeared beneath him, and before he had a chance to react, the gigantic dragon raised him up so that he was standing on its head. A clear dragon's roar rang out, and all of the surrounding giant dragons quickly gathered around Tang Wuling while letting loose joyous roars of their own. "Thank you for laying us to rest. Thank you for planting a seed for the Dragon Clan. Thank you, our leader, our dragon god." A message surged into Tang Wuling's mind, followed immediately by a stream of countless emotions. The sudden and massive influx of information immediately struck him with a splitting headache, but thankfully, he possessed sufficient spiritual power to allow himself to adjust to this in just a short time. This was the Dragon Valley. He finally knew where all of these giant dragons had come from. Having attained mental manifestation level spiritual power, all of his dreams would become projections, just like what was happening right now. The bracelet around his wrist was referred to as the Dragon God's tear by all of the giant dragons, and it was a divine tool that had been left behind by the dragon god. The remains of the dragon god had once been in the Dragon Valley, and its true spirit had been guarding the entire dragon tomb, nourishing all of the dragon skeletons within the tomb in the hope that the dragon clan would enjoy a resurgence someday. However, not long after Tang entered the Dragon Valley, the true spirit of the dragon god was taken away by someone who also possessed the aura of the dragon god. As a result, the entire Dragon Valley was facing collapse. However, Tang also possessed the aura of the dragon god, and his presence stabilized the entire plane, preventing the dragon tomb from completely collapsing. After that, he had spent over 3 years burying dragon skeletons. All of these skeletons contained energy provided to them by the dragon god's true spirit, and having been buried like seeds, the skeletons were given an opportunity to retain their insentience. At the same time, Tang dragon god aura had become more and more pronounced through his constant absorption of dragon souls, and this allowed the entire plane to gradually stabilize during the time that he had spent there. Even though it was an unintentional act, Tang had saved the entire dragon tomb. After all these years, the dragon skeletons in the dragon tomb had gradually reawakened their sentience, and they managed to get into contact with Tang through the dragon god sphere. Of course, this wouldn't have been possible had Tang not reached the mental manifestation level. The power of that domain had stemmed from the projection of the dragon tomb, and the giant golden dragon currently carrying Tang was the most powerful one of the dragon god's 9 sons, the Light Dragon King. The Light Dragon King's dragon spirit had been preserved very well, and it told Tang that it could sense that his dragon god aura was becoming more and more pronounced. If he could find the being that had taken away the dragon god's true spirit and recover the true spirit before absorbing their aura, then he could trigger a dragon clan resurgence. During this process, they were willing to assist Tang at any time through the dragon god sphere. I see, but once the dragon clan is revived, will you remain in the dragon tomb or return to the Douluo continent? Tang asked. The Light Dragon King replied, I understand your concerns. At your core, you're still a human, and even though I don't understand why you possess the dragon god's aura, I can tell you that you don't need to be worried. We were once divine beasts that fought in the battle of the divine realm, but the divine realm no longer exists now, and the dragon god is also fallen, so we'll only be normal dragons. Even if we return to the Douluo continent, our presence won't impact the human race. Besides, we no longer want to return to that lifeless plane anyway. Tang faltered slightly upon hearing this. Can you also sense the depleted life energy on the Douluo continent? Chapter 1544. The Light Dragon King sighed. Of course. The dragon tomb is a small plane that is a subsidiary to the Douluo continent plane, so we can clearly sense all of the changes taking place there. We dragons are no longer almighty divine beasts, but if we can be revived, we'll still retain some of our past godly powers. That would allow us to traverse through space and find a planet suitable for our habitation far away from you humans. Tang was quite relieved to hear this. If the powerful dragon clan were to be revived on the Douluo continent, who knew what type of catastrophe would result? Even if dragons bore no ill will toward humans, there was no guarantee that humans wouldn't attack them for all of their physical assets. All right, if I ever encounter that being, I'll be sure to do my best. How am I supposed to find them? Tang asked. The Light Dragon King replied, you'll be able to sense them once your powers reach the pinnacle of that world. That day won't be far away, and we've already been waiting for countless years, so waiting for a bit longer isn't an issue. Thank you for everything you've done. You are the benefactor of our entire dragon clan. Every time the dragon god steer is used, you will essentially be summoning our small plane. You have to work hard on improving your spiritual powers that will increase the intensity of the call issued to us, and we'll be able to send more power to assist you through a spatial passageway. After every usage, the dragon god's tier requires at least 7 days to recharge its expended natural energies. Tang asked, are you referring to that domain? The Light Dragon King replied, that's not a domain. It's a summoning formation once used by the dragon god to summon his subordinates. Once you attain sufficient spiritual power, you can try communicating with us, and we'll do our best to project more of our power to assist you. Tang was enlightened upon hearing this. Thank you, Light Dragon King. All of a sudden, everything in the surrounding area began to fade. The Light Dragon King cast one final meaningful glance at Tang following which its flesh and scales began to vanish, and it soon reverted back into a giant skeleton. Tang gave it a nod before everything around him disappeared amid a flash of golden light. In the next instant, Tang opened his eyes to discover that he was still situated in his own room. His mental and physical exhaustion had already been washed away, and as he processed a massive amount of information left in his mind, he was gradually able to make sense of it. He exhaled before rising to his feet and making his way over to the window. It was currently right on the stroke of dawn, which was the perfect time to be cultivating the purple demon eyes. A faint smile appeared on Tang face as he activated his purple demon eyes. Just as Tang was reuniting with the giant dragons in his dream, the entire Douluo continent had erupted into a frenzy. That match had become the hot topic on everyone's lips, and in particular, that final attack unleashed by Tang was being heavily lauded. The Spirit Pagoda was doing its best to reduce the exposure the match was receiving, but to no avail. After all, the Spirit Pagoda was still unable to control the entire media. The final Dragon Emperor slash that had injured Dongfang had been heavily scrutinized and analyzed over and over again. The shocking verdict was that attack had been of the limit Douluo level. How old was Oolong? It was clear that he was below 30 years of age. While it was indeed true that Dongfang had been ill-prepared, it was an extraordinary feat for Oolong to have been able to injure him as a young man in his 20s. There were many people who were saying that all of the other 9 competitors were mere bystanders, and that Oolong would be the only one to catch Guyun's eye. Perhaps it was due to her title as Silver Dragon Princess, but a corresponding nickname of Divine Dragon Prince had been coined by the Oolong fanbase. In what seemed like the blink of an eye, Oolong had become a household name. The Joust for a Spouse event's popularity had spiked dramatically, although not quite in the way that the Spirit Pagoda had anticipated. Everyone wanted to see the Divine Dragon Prince and Silver Dragon Princess come together. Kyangyu's hanging had been reduced to mere scenery. Even the rest of the round-robin stage seemed to have lost all meaning. There were some other powerful young prodigies progressing from the other groups as well, but all of them had been severely outshone by Oolong. Shortly thereafter, the Joust for a Spouse event was nearing its conclusion. The final round of matches concluded, and the top 10 was decided. In the eyes of all of the media outlets, the Silver Dragon Princess choosing the Divine Dragon Prince was virtually a foregone conclusion. After that match, many people had racked their brains to track down Oolong in order to interview him, but no one knew where he had gone. According to analysts, this was no surprise. Even though Oolong had won the match, he had been forced to reveal his golden trident. Many people were speculating that this golden trident was very likely to be the sea god's trident wielded by the legendary Tang, and possessing such a divine weapon would certainly place one under immense scrutiny. As such, it only made sense that Oolong was keeping a low profile. However, everyone was sure that he would appear once the final selection began. The biggest loser here was the Spirit Pagoda. It was clear to many people that Kyangyu's painting had been rigged to win the event, but he had been crushed in such an embarrassing fashion. Dongfang had been in a foul mood this entire time. Regardless of how reluctant he was, he had no choice but to disclose the fact that the soul-sucking badge had been destroyed, and the patriarch had been so enraged that he had almost attacked him. However, everything subsided in the end. The Joust for a Spouse event had gone perfectly in Dongfang's eyes, but its entire complexion had changed following this string of events. Who could have predicted that Kyangyu's painting would lose the match even with the soul-sucking badge? Oolong. The mere thought of the name made Dongfang's hands involuntarily ball up into tight fists. Could it be that his trident really was Tang's sea god's trident? But that was impossible. If such a divine weapon truly existed, wouldn't the Tang sect have recovered it already? Could it be that this was only a replica? But how could a replica have been capable of destroying the soul-sucking badge and injuring him? He could still clearly recall that even he had been forced back by the power of the Dragon Emperor slash. He hadn't resisted it with all his power, but he was still a demigod. Chapter 1545. The people he had sent out to track down Oolong had failed to do so, but as long as he appeared at the Joust for a Spouse event again, Dongfang was determined to ensure that he didn't live alive. He had to eliminate Oolong even if it meant making an enemy of the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon clan. He possessed too much potential, and it was almost certain that he would become a demigod in the future. On top of that, his golden trident would make up for the loss of the soul-sucking badge. The final day of the Joust for a Spouse event was coming up the next day, and it was time for the Silver Dragon Princess to make a decision. A trap had already been set by Dongfang during the past few days to ensure that Oolong wouldn't be able to get away. Early the next morning, the Bright City Sports Stadium was already completely surrounded by people, the vast majority of whom didn't have tickets. This was going to be the final day of the Joust for a Spouse event, and even those without tickets would be able to see a live broadcast on the large screen outside the sports stadium. At the same time, there were many people offering high prices to pay for resale tickets. Even though the vast majority of people people were convinced that the Silver Dragon Princess would choose the Divine Dragon Prince. Seeing it in person was a completely different experience. The federal government had no choice but to deploy more soldiers to maintain order, and those with tickets were organized into lines to enter the stadium in an orderly fashion. There were many people chatting excitedly with one another in the lines. Do you think the Silver Dragon Princess will fight the candidates today? She's free to challenge anyone from the final 10. Maybe. Apparently, the Silver Dragon Princess is also very powerful. Of course, she's definitely no match for the Divine Dragon Prince. If you ask me, it doesn't really matter. It's not like she's going to choose anyone else anyway. The Divine Dragon Prince is way too handsome. Stop drooling. It's not like you have a chance with him. Tickets were examined one after another, and soon, a man with a hood over his head reached the front of the line. Please display your ticket, the employee urged. With so many people in the lines, it was naturally best to do things as quickly as possible. I don't have a ticket, the hooded man replied. If you don't have a ticket, then go away. The employee said in an impatient manner. The young man removed his hood, then wiped a hand over his own face to reveal a set of handsome facial features. Ugh, it's Douluo. A burst of screams immediately rang out in the surrounding area. That's right, the young man was none other than Douluo. Despite the trap that had been set for him, he had managed to arrive without being detected by the spirit pagoda. With his powers and the special training he had undertaken on the demonic island, it was a simple task for him to sneak into the stadium. Furthermore, with his mental manifestation level spiritual power, he could manifest projections of himself within a certain area, making it extremely difficult to determine where his true location was. As such, Dou was planning to capture him following the Joust for a spouse event anyway, rather than trying to catch him in advance. Can I go in now? Tang asked the employee as he greeted the passionate crowd around him. Oh, of course. The employee stuttered. Never did he imagine that he would meet Douluo face to face, and he had suddenly become very nervous. This was a young man who had been able to injure Dou. It was no exaggeration to say that he stood at the very pinnacle of the younger generation. He had already achieved mental manifestation as a titled Douluo, and this meant that his progression to the limit Douluo level was virtually assured. There were many experts who were predicting that he would become a limit Douluo in 10 years at most. Thus, Tang strode into the Bright City Sports Stadium in a proud and distinguished manner, exposing himself for all to see. The live broadcast had already begun, so he wasn't concerned that the spirit pagoda would try anything. Otherwise, all of the efforts it had made to repair its reputation would go to waste. Tang made his way into the resting area, and the first person that he caught sight of was who was standing not far away from the entrance. She was looking very handsome in a set of vintage silver robes with her long hair spilling down her back, and even though she was still in male attire, she was looking more gender neutral than usual. Hello, Tang greeted with a smile. Fixed an intense gaze onto him. So you're determined to try and take her from me? Tang replied in an indifferent manner. What are you trying to say? Everyone's objective is the same here. Don't make it sound like she's already yours. Do you even have the right to be here? Immediately flared up with rage, and she wanted nothing better than to give him a vicious slap to the face. For some reason, she always became very short-tempered in his presence. Tang was clearly implying that she had no right to be here as she wasn't even a man. She aimed a vicious glare at Tang before turning away. Otherwise, she was afraid that she would be unable to hold back from attacking him. What was most frustrating to her was that she was now certain that she was no match for him. Tang and Kyangyu's Hanting's battle had truly been an astonishing spectacle for her, and she was stunned by just how many trump cards Tang had up his sleeve. Tang adopted Douluo's usual arrogant smile, then found a place to sit to await the commencement of the Joust for a spouse event's final stage. At this point, all of the top competitors of the other groups had also already arrived. They paid no heed to Tang and verbal altercation, and nor did they communicate with one another. It was as if they were all preparing for war. The layout in the Bright City Sports Stadium had been completely changed. The competition platform still stood, but another tall platform that was around 20 meters tall had been erected next to it. This was a square-shaped platform that could only hold 4 or 5 people at most, and it was decorated in an extremely lavish manner, clearly reserved for the Silver Dragon Princess and the one that she was going to choose. The entire Bright City Sports Stadium was soon completely packed, and all of the spectators were waiting with excitement in their eyes. Everyone was eager to see if Douluo would choose Douluo, or if a dark horse were going to steal the limelight. The spectators who were supporting different candidates were arguing in a heated manner, and due to the fact that the Silver Dragon Princess had the right to challenge any candidate, the protective barrier was still in place. Commentator Ifei had transformed into MC Ifei for today, and he was situated in the commentator's position beside the rostrum in a dashing white suit. Please take your seats and quiet down, everyone. The final stage of our Joust for a spouse event is about to begin. After so many days of matches, I'm sure all of the final 10 candidates have been tried and proven. What an exciting moment this is for us all. Who is our Silver Dragon Princess going to choose? Truth be told, I'm just as excited as all of you are to see her final decision. All of the spectators gradually fell silent, and some of them were rather confused. Wasn't there supposed to be some type of performance at the conclusion of an occasion as grand as this Joust for a spouse event? Why was it beginning right away? It seemed a little rushed. In reality, a performance had been planned, and very renowned artists on the continent had been invited, but the result hadn't gone according to plan, so there was no point in putting on such a performance. If the Spirit Pagoda had a choice, it would have cancelled this final stage altogether. Chapter 1546. Kyangyu's Hanting was currently seated on the rostrum with veins bulging on his forehead, reflecting his tumultuous emotions. His expression was slightly twisted, and he was gripping tightly onto the armrests of his chair. Dou was situated on the main seat, and he paid no heed to this. He had already calmed down, and in his eyes, Kyangyu's Hanting's defeat wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Setbacks often acted as the best motivation for soul masters, and there was a severe shortage of such setbacks in Kyangyu's Hanting's life. As such, he hadn't tried to talk Kyangyu's Hanting out of his foul mood. This was something that he needed to recover from on his own and convert into motivation. He was already in his 30s. If he couldn't even get over something like this, then how could he take over the reins at the Spirit Pagoda in the future? Douluo was seated on the other side of Dou. On this day, she was wearing a long golden dress, and even though she had only applied some simple makeup, she was exceptionally stunning to behold. Even some of the high-ranking federal officials on the rostrum couldn't help but steal occasional glances at her. Dou turned to Douluo before asking, "Are you confident?" "I am." Douluo replied without any hesitation. "All right, I'll be watching." Dou nodded in response. Douluo also nodded, but didn't say anything further. Kyangyu's Hanting finally cast his gaze toward Douluo, and he wanted to say something, but refrained in the end. His brows furrowed even more tightly, and there was an invisible aura emanating from his body. He was constantly roaring at himself to become more powerful in his own heart. Failure was a terrible feeling, especially in such a public setting, and he never wanted to have to go through this again, so he had to become more powerful. "All right, allow me to introduce the final courting segment of our Joust for a spouse event." Ifei was already beginning to announce the rules for the final stage. In this final stage, all 10 candidates have a chance to be chosen by Douluo. Douluo will be taking the stage in person soon, and all candidates will have a chance to display their sincerity, offer up presents, or deliver a speech to win her heart. On top of that, Douluo can request to spar with any candidate of her choice, and at the end of this stage, she will make her choice. The process wasn't very complex. In fact, it could be said that it was overly simplistic compared to the previous stages of the event. However, all of the spectators were eager to see the final result, so they didn't think much of this. Seeing as there wasn't going to be any foreplay, it was better to get to the point as quickly as possible. Now then, let's welcome our final 10 candidates into the stadium. Please give them a warm round of applause and yell out the name of the one you want to see take the Silver Dragon Princess home today. A wave of cheers immediately rang out on the spectator stands, and there were other names being called out, but chants of Douluo were drowning out everything else. Douluo, Douluo, Douluo. Kyangyu's Hanting was trembling slightly as he listened to these passionate chants. How he wished that the name being chanted belonged to him. He was supposed to be the one winning the heart of the woman of his dreams in front of all of these people, but that accursed man had ruined his plan and taken his moment under the limelight. Even if the end result would still be the same, this shame and regret would remain with him forever. He had never hated someone as much as this because all of the people that he hated were generally dead. Douluo, I'm going to tear you to shreds no matter the cost. Meanwhile, Dou merely looked on in a completely expressionless manner, as if none of this had anything to do with him. The final 10 candidates were brought onto the platform in order of the group they had emerged from, and as the third person strode onto the platform, the cheering immediately became louder. Tang wore a vibrant smile as he waved at the spectators in the stands. Was right behind him, and she scoffed. "What are you showing off for? You're making it seem like your victory is assured." Tang shot a glance back at her. "Are you saying that you'll win instead?" "Aye." Lan Foisey really wanted to say that she did believe that, but she had no confidence at all. She didn't think that she was better than Tang Wuling in any aspect, and she couldn't help but think of what choice she would make if she were in the Silver Dragon Princess's shoes. What am I thinking? All men are so disgusting. Why would I choose any of them? Tang Wuling was naturally unaware of what she was thinking, but he could glean a lot from her displeased expression. A serious look appeared in his eyes. This was perhaps going to be a very important test for himself, and she was the key to this test. He could already sense her presence on the other side of the coin platform. She was so close, yet seemed so far away. Yue, how will you choose today? In reality, no one was less confident than Tang Wuling, as only he was aware that this was not just some simple joust for a spouse event. The 10 candidates were spread out in a line next to one another with 3 to 4 meters between each of them. They were all handsome young talents, and even the oldest one among them was only in his 30s, which was very young among high-grade soul masters. Of course, Tang Wuling was still the hot favorite, and aside from the chances for Yulong, there were also people who had begun chanting Yuna's name. A hint of vigor and excitement suddenly crept into Wei voice as he announced, "Now then, please welcome the star of the show, Silver Dragon Princess Yuna." The sky suddenly dimmed, and a pillar of silver light descended from above, illuminating a figure that was rising up into the air in the distance. She wore a fluttering golden dress, and her silver hair was swaying with the wind. She was like a celestial maiden as she spread her arms open, and after what seemed like an eternity, but also only a split second, she drifted toward the coin platform. In that instant, she was so beautiful that those who beheld her almost forgot how to breathe, and the raucous spectators were instantly stunned into silence. In their eyes, Yuna's figure seemed to have been magnified, allowing them to clearly witness her gorgeous features and perfect figure. Even Tang Wuling was struck by an indescribable sense of excitement at the sight of her. She had chosen a golden dress for this occasion. He then looked into Yuna's bright, purple eyes, and they didn't betray any emotion, but Tang Wuling could clearly sense that there was something contained within them. In that instant, it was as if everything had disappeared, and the two of them were the only things left in this world. A faint smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face as he took a deep breath to steady his emotions, while Lan Foisey couldn't help but praise. She really is so beautiful. She then reflexively cast her gaze toward Tang Wuling, and an indescribable feeling immediately welled up in her heart at the sight of him staring intently at the coin platform. Yuna gave the 10 candidates a slight nod of acknowledgement, and Fei announced, "I'm sure everyone has been eagerly awaiting this day. Now, the 10 candidates will have a chance to put on their own displays, and in order to ensure fairness, we'll be drawing lots to decide the sequence." A faint smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face. This moment was finally about to arrive. The first one to be drawn is. Fei paused slightly before announcing, Lan Foisey from the 4th group. Chapter 1547. Lan Foisey was still processing the strange emotion that had welled up in her heart, and thus, she was startled by the sudden announcement of her name. She reflexively pointed at herself, and asked, "Me?" Fei couldn't help but be amused by her rather comical display. "Welcome, Lan Foisey." Only then did Lan Foisey realize what was happening, and she blushed as she took a step forward before looking up at Yuna on the courting platform. Miss Yuna, I fell in love with you ever since I first saw you on television. You're so beautiful, and I can sense that your beauty is pure and holy. I was struck by a natural urge to approach you, so I came here. I actually ran away from home to come here, but I don't regret my decision. If you choose me, I'll be good to you for the rest of my life. This is a present for you." She flicked the hand over as she spoke, and a small box appeared at the center of her palm. She carefully removed the lid of the box, revealing an 8-colored bead inside. The bead itself was actually transparent, but there were lights of 9 colors swirling within it, consisting of blue, red, green, yellow, azure, black, purple, gold, and white, presenting a very peculiar sight to behold. Even with Yuna's vast wealth of knowledge and experience, she couldn't help but be stunned by the sight of this bead. A hint of sorrow appeared in Lan Foisey's eyes as she said, "This was left to me by my father, and my mother says that I can only give this to someone I truly love. This is the most precious thing I have, and my love for you is true. If you choose me, then it's yours, and I implore you to cherish it." Yuna's captivating voice rang out in response. "I can't take that. Even if I choose you, I can't take something so precious from you. I can feel your sincerity and your love, and for that, I thank you." What exactly was that 8-colored bead? The vast majority of people present had no clue. Tang Wuling was standing right beside Lan Foisey, and with his enormous spiritual power, he could sense that a boundless ocean seemed to have suddenly appeared before his eyes as Lan Foisey brought out that bead. The 8-colored light was filled with pure power of laws, and this was definitely a priceless treasure. Even the tribulation lightning that Tang Wuling attracted during heavenly refinement only had 7 colors, yet this bead contained 8, so it transcended even tribulation lightning. Never did he think that Lan Foisey would bring out something this incredible for a joust for a spouse event. Wasn't she being way too sincere? A stir immediately ran through the spectators upon seeing this. They didn't know what that bead was, but judging from Yuna's reaction, it was definitely an extremely precious item. Kaiangyu Dongfang's expression changed slightly for the very first time. As a limit Douluo, he was naturally also able to sense the rich power of laws contained within the bead. For a demigod like him, this was an extremely important item. The 8 colors entailed 8 types of laws, and there had been a saying since ancient times that mastering 9 types of laws would grant one godhood. This meant that this bead was one step away from becoming a god. If he could obtain it, there was even a chance that he would be able to become a quasi-god. So how could he not be tempted by this? Fei said, "It looks like Lan Foisey has offered an extraordinary present. Even Yuna can sense its value and Lan Foisey's sincerity. Do you have any questions for or wish to challenge Lan Foisey?" Yuna shook her head in response. "I don't have any questions." Fei continued, "Then please take a short rest, Lan Foisey, and we'll continue with the displays. Our next candidate is Yuan Hui from the 8th group." Yuan Hui was a contestant who had also drawn a lot of attention. He was only a soul Douluo, but with his iron fists, he was able to defeat one powerful opponent after another. His appearance was very ordinary, but beneath the guise was an extraordinary character. Upon being prompted, he strode forward and looked up at Yuna on the coin platform. For some reason, Yuan Hui's expression seemed a little off to Fei, and he urged, "You may begin now, Yuan Hui." "My name is Yuan Yui. I come from Shrek Academy, and I withdraw from this event," Yuan Hui said with a faint smile before taking a couple of steps backward. Her words immediately stirred the entire stadium up into a frenzy. Shrek Academy had stood on the continent for over 20,000 years, and no one had forgotten it, even though it had been destroyed. On top of that, it was currently being rebuilt. Not many people were aware of the conflict between Shrek Academy and the Spirit Pagoda, as it wasn't as obvious as the bad blood between the Tang sect and Spirit Pagoda. Now, there was a self-proclaimed Shrek Academy student who had made it into the final 10, but had withdrawn from the event. What was this supposed to mean? Was he simply trying to make a statement to announce the return of Shrek Academy? Fei was rather flabbergasted, and he almost blurted out the question, "Why would you withdraw?" Aliases weren't prohibited during this joust for a spouse event, so he hadn't broken any rules. So why had he withdrawn? Yuna's expression remained unchanged. She was naturally already aware that this was Yuan Yui. Fei took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. This live broadcast was being watched across the entire continent, so the show had to go on. Looks like Yuan Hui is lacking in confidence and has decided to withdraw, leaving us with only 9 candidates left. Let's continue. He attempted to gloss over this awkward situation with a concise statement, but all of the media's cameras were currently focused on him and Yuan Yui. Yuan Yui's expression remained calm, and she was looking directly at Yuna without any inhibition. Next up is Zheng Yu from the 1st group. Zheng Yu is also a soul Douluo that swept through the competition and defeated the title Douluo in his group. Zheng Yu was a tall and broad young man, and he looked up at Yuna with a smile before also taking a couple of steps backward. "I am Yue Zheng Yu from Shrek Academy, and I withdraw from this event." That's right, the top competitor from the 1st group was none other than Yue Zheng Yu. The chatter that had sprung up in the spectator stands had become a full-blown riot at this point. Chapter 1548. One anomaly was an exception, but what about 2? On top of that, they had both chosen to withdraw. Wasn't this a ploy to embarrass the Spirit Pagoda? At the same time, they were announcing to everyone that Shrek Academy was back, and that its students were still as exceptional as ever. This joust for a spouse event had gathered all of the most powerful young soul masters on the continent, yet they had still managed to progress to the final stage. Kaiangyu Dongfang's expression finally changed slightly upon seeing this, and a cold look appeared in his eyes. So this was how Shrek Academy had chosen to retaliate? All of the competitors' identities had been investigated and verified in advance, but no issues had been discovered surrounding them. What did this entail? It entailed that they had planned everything. Shrek Academy had already been destroyed, so who exactly was it that was helping them? On top of that, what was going on with these lots that were being drawn? Why were the 2 Shrek Academy students drawn in succession? Fei's smile immediately stiffened slightly. He knew that something was very, very wrong. But what could he do? On this occasion, he didn't even try to gloss over the subject and hurriedly drew the next name. All right, up next is Leisure from the second group. Please give him a warm welcome. Leisure was quite portly and always wore a smile on his face. During this Joust for a Spouse event, he had been given the nickname of Palms of Destruction. Despite his rotund figure, he was extremely fast and agile, and his palms were imbued with immense power of destruction that there seemed to be no counter to. All martial souls that he had faced had been crushed by his palms of destruction without any exception. Among all of the groups, the second group was the weakest, without even a single titled Douluo among its ranks. As such, he hadn't encountered any powerful opponents, and enjoyed an easy trip to the final 10. There were 2 other competitors in the group who seemed to be capable of matching him, but they chose to withdraw from the event after defeating all of the other competitors. So Leisure was also known as the luckiest competitor of all. I am Shu Lizzie of Shrek Academy, and I withdraw from this event. Leisure said with a smile before taking 2 steps backward. Despite his stuffed bun martial soul, he had trained arduously to master the power of destruction and the mysterious heaven method. His hard work had compensated for his shortcomings, and in order to be with Hughes England, he had worked just as hard, if not harder than everyone else in Shrek's 7 monsters. This was the third one. The spectators were beginning to become very worked up. At this point, even an idiot could tell that Shrek Academy was intentionally raining on this parade. 3 of them had progressed to the final 10, yet all 3 of them had withdrawn. What was the meaning of this? Kayangyu Dongfang's expression had completely darkened, and the enraged Kayangyu Tang suddenly rose to his feet, only to be forced back onto his chair by Kayangyu Dongfang. What are you doing? Do you think this situation isn't already embarrassing enough? This was a live broadcast being watched by the entire federation, so they could only repress their fury and continue watching. Fei was stunned into silence and had become rather fearful of continuing. Never did he think that something like this would happen. As a member of the Spirit Pagoda, he was naturally aware of the bad blood between the Spirit Pagoda and Shrek Academy, and in this situation, he had no idea what to do. Right at this moment, Gyuna cast her gaze toward him and calmly instructed, "Continue." Her voice was like a bomb that had been struck in Fei's mind, and he instantly returned to his senses. Gyuna's encouragement instilled him with the conviction to continue. In any case, he wasn't responsible for this, and the event had to continue. Otherwise, it would become a massive joke. The Spirit Pagoda had poured in so much resources to make this happen. It couldn't just be abandoned now. He could only pray that no more people from Shrek Academy would emerge. I am Hughes England of Shrek Academy, and I withdraw from this event. Hughes England's male alias, Yi Lan, had earned the nickname Sword God for himself, and had also been a hot favorite. I am Shu Shaoan of Shrek Academy, and I withdraw from this event. Shu Shaoan's male alias, Shu Yen, was renowned as the king of control, and had tormented all of his opponents until they ran out of soul power before being forced to concede. I am Shishi of Shrek Academy, and I withdraw from this event. Shishi had adopted the alias of Shien, and had been given the nickname Space-Time Traveler. No one was able to match his speed, and his opponents were often defeated before they could even track down his location. Fei was already completely numb at this point. The tally stood at 6. Aside from Lan Foisi, all 6 of the candidates after her were from Shrek Academy. As these names emerged, the employees of Spirit Pagoda quickly presented their information to Kayangyu Dongfang. They were the current Shrek 7 monsters, and aside from their leader, all of them had arrived. All of a sudden, a thought occurred to Kayangyu Dongfang, and his breathing began to accelerate. In that instant, he finally understood what had happened. However, even though he had realized what was going on, he had no idea what to do. Was he supposed to stop the event? In that case, the Spirit Pagoda would become a universal laughingstock, and this event would be a complete and utter failure. How was it possible that all of Shrek's 6 monsters had been assigned to different groups? And how had they all managed to progress? There were support system soul masters among them. Only a fool would believe that this was a coincidence. Who was the one that had drawn the lots? It was the Vice Battle God Hall Master, whom he had invited in person. How had everything turned out like this? It was finally time for the 8th name to be announced, and this was a burly man who declared, "I am Sima Jinkai of the Tang sect, the personal bodyguard of the Tang sect master, and I withdraw from this event." Fei's first reaction was relief as there was finally someone who wasn't from Shrek Academy, but in the next instant, his pupils abruptly contracted. The Tang sect? The Tang sect had been declared as a treasonous organization. How could it be the Tang sect? Furthermore, the name of Sima Jinkai was far too familiar. That's right, he had used his true name to participate in this event, and he had brought with him a recommendation letter from the Southern Legion. There was no one in his group who was able to pose even the slightest obstacle to him, and he had progressed in dominant fashion. It was only due to his age and his rough appearance that he wasn't mentioned in the same breath as Oolong Yu. When did Wild Gale Saber Demon Sima Jinkai become the Tang sect master's personal bodyguard? As soon as the terms Tang sect and Tang sect master were uttered, the entire federation was completely stunned. The vice president abruptly rose to his feet on the rostrum and yelled, "Stop the broadcast right away. Chairman Kayangyu Dongfang, you owe me an explanation. What the hell is going on here?" Kayangyu Dongfang had also stood up from his chair. This was undoubtedly a conspiracy. The Joust for a Spouse event had progressed extremely smoothly up to this point. Who could have predicted that the Tang sect and Shrek Academy would lash out on the final day? Don't stop the broadcast. Kayangyu Dongfang yelled. The vice president turned to him with an enraged expression. Why? So we can embarrass ourselves even more? Kayangyu Dongfang replied with a grim expression. It's too late. Stopping the broadcast now would be a concession. After that, his lips trembled slightly as he communicated something to the vice president. The vice president's brows were tightly furrowed as he reluctantly nodded in response. Are you sure? Chapter 1549. Kayangyu Dongfang replied, "I'm positive. This is the only way we can salvage our reputation. On top of that, the Tang sect and Shrek Academy are the ones stirring up trouble here, so we're within our rights to heavily criticize them." The vice president immediately understood what Kayangyu Dongfang was saying, and he said, "Apologies for my lack of composure just now. I'll begin the preparations right away." Kayangyu Dongfang directed his attention back to the venue as the vice president departed. All he could do now was weather the storm. If he were to bring the Joust for a Spouse event to a premature end, then the Spirit Pagoda's reputation would be swept to the ground. In fact, the Tang sect and Shrek Academy were most likely hoping that he would make the rash decision to end the event. As such, there was nothing that he could do aside from sit and watch. Fei's hands were already trembling, and only after being instructed by Gyuna to continue again did he pick up the 9th name. The spectators had erupted into a frenzy, but not all of them were supporting the Tang sect and Shrek Academy. 7 people had withdrawn in succession. They were clearly ruining the event. To the spectators, it was more important that the beautiful silver dragon princess find her happiness, so there were already spectators hurling abuse at the top of their lungs. The 9th candidate is Arahang. Hee, I'm from the body sect. Arahang chuckled as he strode forward. Fei heaved a massive sigh of relief upon hearing this. I'm also the senior disciple brother of the Tang sect master, and I withdraw from the event. Arahang stepped back to join the others with a smile on his face. That's right, aside from Lan Foisi, the final candidates were entirely comprised of Shrek's 7 monsters, Sima Jinkai, and Arahang. The end result appeared to be quite straightforward, but the planning had been extremely complex and meticulous. The plan had been hatched from the very beginning during registration, and countless strings had been pulled to create this surprise. Not only did Kayangyu Dongfang want to see Kayangyu Santing and Tang Wulin in the same group, this was also what Tang Wulin wanted, as he had never planned to give Kayangyu Santing an opportunity to progress to the final 10. Among the final 10, 9 were from the Tang sect and Shrek Academy, and the remaining one was a woman. Everything had been planned prior to the commencement of the event, and this was the Tang sect and Shrek Academy's revenge. Regardless of the public reception, the Spirit Pagoda had been thoroughly embarrassed. Furthermore, this still wasn't the end. Fei was trembling as he turned toward the only remaining candidate, who was standing beside Lan Foisi. It was Oolong Yu. All of a sudden, he was struck by a sense of realization. Tang Wulin was looking calmly up at Gyuna. In fact, his gaze had never left her this entire time. He had paid no heed to his friends withdrawing one after another or the reaction of the spectators, as if none of that had anything to do with him, and he had kept his gaze focused solely on her, as if to tell her that he could accomplish far more than she could imagine. He was no longer the powerless student and ordinary member of the Tang sect. He was now the Tang sect master and the Sea God's Pavilion master, a man truly capable of changing many things. Gyuna's gaze was also fixed on him, but she wore a complex expression as opposed to the scorching look in his eyes. She had already discovered all of this, and she knew Tang Wulin's intentions, but she couldn't stop them in advance, as doing so would hurt him and his friends. However, she couldn't just concede like this. She had her own mission. It was undoubtedly already planned that the final candidate to take the stage would be Oolong Yu. The most important person should always appear last, and this entire final stage of the Joust for a Spouse event event was firmly under the control of the Tang sect and Shrek Academy. This was what Yu Dongfang found to be the most disturbing. It seemed that everything had been set in motion well in advance, yet he was completely oblivious. For the first time, he realized that the Tang sect and Shrek Academy were more powerful than he had imagined, and this was definitely not a good feeling. Last but not least, we have the candidate from the third group, Douluo. Ifei's introductions had already become very minimalistic and concise. He had planned to give the Divine Dragon Prince a rousing introduction, but he couldn't bring himself to do so now as he knew that something big was about to happen, something that would shock the entire continent. If this Douluo were also from the Tang sect or Shrek Academy, then this joust for a spouse event would have been a complete joke. The spectators suddenly fell silent upon hearing this introduction. Despite what the Tang sect and Shrek Academy had done, they still hoped to see the Silver Dragon Princess and Divine Dragon Prince come together in the end. Under the scrutiny of all of the spectators, Tang took a step forward instead of withdrawing from the event. I'm here, Yuna. From the very first day I met you, my heart was reserved only for you, so I can't leave. You were always by my side, and we studied and cultivated together every day. You were like a pool of warm and soothing water that my heart was constantly basking in. At the time, I was fixated on becoming more powerful, but I had gradually become accustomed to your presence by my side. That was the happiest period of my life. Regardless of what motives you had for approaching me, I could tell that your feelings for me were sincere. Time slowly passed by, and when I realized that I had fallen hopelessly in love with you, you were also in the same position. I'm not good at sweet talking. All I can tell you is that I have what it takes to be with you. Even if you do end up opposing the entire world someday, I'll still stand by your side. I'll defend you with everything that I have, and perhaps I may not be able to see everyone as my enemies, but at the very least, I'm willing to give up my life for you. Douluo, this is a present that I've been working very hard on recently. I don't know if you'll like it, but I really did give it my all. I hope that you can feel my love through it, and that it'll always protect you. Aside from this present, I want to constantly stay by your side to protect you. Tang raised his right hand as he spoke, and a ring on his finger suddenly lit up. A beam of rainbow light erupted into the heavens, then hovered directly before Yuna. All of the spectators were instantly stunned by the sight of this item, as were all of the powerful beings from the Tang sect and Shrek Academy. Yu's painting sat on the rostrum in a slack-jawed manner, unable to muster up even a single word. This was a complete suit of armor that was devoid of any fancy patterns. It was entirely silver in color, and included a full set, including a helmet, pauldrons, breastplate, wings, greaves, etc. Chapter 1550. The suit of armor was shimmering with dazzling rainbow light, and even though it wasn't all that fancy in design, it seemed to be something that was one with nature. Only battle armor masters of the 3-word level and above knew what this was. It was the base form of a suit of divine grade battle armor that had been constructed from heavenly refinement metals. Once a 3-word battle armor master fused this suit of armor with their suit of 3-word battle armor and carved new circuits onto it, their battle armor would be upgraded to the 4-word level. This was truly a priceless item that would never appear in any auction on the continent. The number of 4-word battle armor masters was extremely limited. Not all suits of 4-word battle armor were constructed from heavenly refined metals, but those suits of armor were ultimately somewhat inferior to their heavenly refined counterparts. Thus, the value of this present was completely indescribable. If one were to look closely, they would discover a series of extremely meticulous hammer marks on the suit of silver battle armor that were arranged in an orderly fashion, reflecting the effort and attention to detail of its creator. It had taken Tang 2 whole months to complete this suit of battle armor, and this was the present he had prepared for Yuna. The suit of battle armor contained his blood, sweat, and tears, as well as his fearlessly sincere emotions. As all of the spectators stared at the suit of divine grade battle armor, they gradually began to return to their senses, and a massive stir immediately ran through the spectator stands again. The vast majority of people didn't know what this suit of armor was, but they could sense its power. However, the soul masters present were already aware of what it entailed for Yuna to proclaim that he had crafted this suit of battle armor. It meant that he was a divine blacksmith capable of heavenly refinement. Yuna was also completely rooted to the spot. She had obviously predicted that Tang would give her a present on this day, but never did she think that it would be a suit of 4-word battle armor. Divine blacksmith Senhua had already announced that he was temporarily refusing heavenly refinement jobs due to health reasons, so it had been a very long time since the spirit pagoda had gotten its hands on even a tiny piece of heavenly refined metal. Yet this was a full suit of heavenly refined battle armor. It was no wonder that she could sense the power of the rainbow lightning law within his body. This had been accumulated through his forging. How many elemental tribulations would he have had to withstand to create this piece of armor? Yuna's vision was already beginning to blur. His words were so straightforward and devoid of romanticism, but she could clearly sense his sincerity. She knew that she couldn't cry, but she still couldn't hold back her own tears. Right at this moment, Tang turned toward the spectators and wiped his right hand over his own face to reveal his true appearance, which was far more handsome than even Douluo. My name is Douluo, and I'm not from the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon clan. I am the Tang sect master and Sea God's Pavilion master, Tang Douluo is my girlfriend, and I'm taking her home today. On top of that, I want to tell everyone that the Tang sect is not a treasonous organization. Without the Tang sect, all soul masters would have been enslaved by the spirit hall 20,000 years ago. Without the Tang sect, the Douluo continent would have already been conquered by the Sun Moon continent. The Tang sect and Shrek Academy have maintained the balance of the entire continent, and I'm not asking for all of you to understand the Tang sect and Shrek Academy, but I'm here to tell you all that the Tang sect will never disappear. Regardless of what the Federation does, the Tang sect will continue to work toward maintaining peace on the continent, as will Shrek Academy. Shrek Academy is still the #1 academy on the continent, and it will continue to nurture bright young talents for millennia to come. Both the Tang sect and Shrek Academy are averse to war, but we definitely do not fear war. During the trial of 5 gods, I defended the glory of the Tang sect and Shrek Academy, and displayed the power of our Douluo continent. I did indeed stop the federal fleet, but that's because I didn't want to see widespread senseless slaughter. A war will only benefit the evil soul masters of the Holy Spirit cult who are lurking in the shadows. Ask yourselves this: if you have family in the military, would you want them to face threats to their lives? As an invader, can we really justify our actions? The Tang sect and Shrek Academy will always be advocates of peace. His words were firm and unyielding, and he turned to meet the gaze of the enraged Yu Dongfang on the rostrum. He raised his head high, and in that instant, it was as if he had inherited Douluo's pride. He cast his gaze back to Yuna and waved his right hand through the air, upon which the suit of divine grade battle armor landed beside her. He then knelt down on one knee and asked, "Douluo, will you marry me?" At this moment, all of the spectators felt as if their brains had short-circuited. Douluo was Tang, the man who had defeated an entire empire in the trial of 5 gods. It was no wonder that he was this powerful. On top of that, he and the Silver Dragon Princess seemed to have an extensive history with one another. It was clear that all of this had been arranged by the Tang sect and Shrek Academy. The Tang sect and Shrek Academy had done so much to prevent a war. Who exactly was doing the right thing here? Many of the spectators were yelling for Yuna to accept his feelings as he was confessing to her, but now the spectators had all fallen silent, and they were struggling to make sense of this situation. Yuna suddenly turned away and wiped the tears from her face. "You shouldn't have come here. Why didn't you listen to me?" Her voice was trembling slightly as she spoke. Tang replied without any hesitation, "I had to come." Yuna took a deep breath, and a determined look suddenly appeared in her purple eyes. "I'll marry you if you can beat me." The entire stadium erupted into a frenzy upon hearing this. The Silver Dragon Princess was issuing a challenge to Tang Lan Foizi was already completely rooted to the spot. Had already been stunned after the first person from Shrek Academy had withdrawn. What just happened? After that, one person withdrew after another, and as she listened to the names of the Tang sect and Shrek Academy being repeated over and over again, her heart was filled with complex emotions. Only after Tang revealed his identity and confessed to Yuna did she realize just how much history there was between them. This was an indescribable feeling, and she had never encountered anything like this before. She was feeling completely superfluous and unnecessary as she stood there, and her feelings weren't incorrect. No one was paying her any attention. Right at this moment, Yuna descended onto the competition platform across from Tang. On the rostrum, Yu Dongfang was holding back Yu's painting, who was attempting to rush onto the platform, and the former said in a cold voice, "We can only place our trust in Nana now. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read."